news and features from around Australia and around the world. This is Travel Radio Australia. Here's your host and travel guide, Ren Sveers.
Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us on another action-packed adventure. We'll take you to various parts of the world, Switzerland, Queensland here in Australia, my home state of Queensland. And where else? Okay, we're going camper vanning and we're going to visit an elves hideaway in Finland. All very interesting stuff coming up right from now. Here's Jeff Harrison to present an interview he recorded with Alan from Hotel Caprice in Wengen, Switzerland.
Ski TV International, and we're here at the ski show in London, and we have a very interesting man, Alan Norris, who is the owner of the Caprice Hotel in Wengen in Switzerland. Hi Alan, welcome.
Hi Jeff, well we're standing here today on the stand of the Euro Airport and the Jungfrau region, and if people are wondering why Euro Airport, well Euro Airport in Basel is the quickest gateway into the Jungfrau region with direct trains to Interlaken Ost, which is the gateway. Then you take the local mountain trains up to Wengen, which is a car-free resort, absolutely beautiful, which has the Eiger, the Monk and the Jungfrau Mountains as a backdrop. Wengen stands in the center of the Jungfrau region. So if you base yourselves in Wengen, it gives you access to Mürren across the valley in about half an hour, and you can ski down to Grindelwald from the top of the mountain again in about 20 minutes, half an hour. Now, I've owned Hotel Caprice for about 15 or 16 years. Hotel Caprice is a 4-star small luxury hotel. It stands right at the end of the ski piste. So you ski right back to the hotel, and nearly all the rooms have got absolutely fantastic views of the Jungfrau and the view into the valley below. You can actually see something like 12,000 feet in one view, and in fact my Swiss friends tell me that the Caprice has the best mountain hotel view in the whole of Switzerland. All the rooms face south, so you've got the sun, you've got the view, and we have a splendid restaurant which serves gourmet food, international gourmet food. So hope to see you in Wengen and at Hotel Caprice.
And just tell us some of the yearly events that happen around Wengen. There must be some great things happening.
The biggest event in Wengen is in January, and it's the Lauberhorn race. Now, the Lauberhorn race, the downhill, is the longest downhill race on the ski circuit. And Wengen comes alive for the downhill race, whereas the normal population of Wengen during the ski season is about 10,000. About 40,000 people come to the Lauberhorn race, and it is the biggest sporting event in the whole of Switzerland. Across the valley, a week later, you've got the Inferno race in Mürren. In the summer, and the summer season is a great season as well. In the summer, we have the Jungfrau Marathon. It's a full-length marathon starting in Interlaken, and they run up past Wengen all the way up to a place called Eiger Gletscher, and then down to Kleiner Scheidegg where it finishes. And the guys who do this, it's amazing. There's a difference in altitude of something like 1,400 meters, and yet they do it in about 3 hours, which is sensational.
And tell us the website for more information for the hotel.
The hotel website is www.caprice-wengen.com. Give you all the information about the hotel.
Terrific, Alan. Thank you very much for being with us on Ski TV International.
Thank you, Jeff. Very nice talking with you.
Whitehaven Beach is regularly recognised as being one of the top spots in Australia, but now the iconic 7-kilometre stretch of white silica has been named the second best beach in the world. Flight Network, Canada's largest travel website, has created a list of the world's 50 best beaches after consultation with more than 600 of the world's top travel professionals, including journalists, editors, bloggers and agencies. Whitehaven Beach, which scored 10 out of 10 for sheer untouched beauty, remoteness and sand and water quality, was described as heaven on earth by the judges. They said Whitehaven Beach will make you believe in love at first sight. Seeing all that untouched natural beauty will make you believe in a tropical utopia with glowing sands and crystalline beaches. This stretch of sand backed by tree-covered mountains is a heaven on earth which one must see to believe. Sharon Livingston from the Travel magazine said, Whitehaven Beach has oh-so-white sands, deepest green rainforests and crystalline waters. It's a wild island, part of the Great Barrier Reef, and is by far the most beautiful location to experience. A spokesperson for Flight Network said the world's 50 best beaches was the most definitive list of beaches ever assembled. By asking the top travel professionals, the people who do this for a living, to gain insight from their opinions and expertise, Flight Network has created what they claim is the most trustworthy and accurate list out there to inspire travellers and help them choose their upcoming Northern Hemisphere winter holiday destinations. Tourism Whitsundays sales and marketing manager Tash Wheeler thanked Flight Network for their hard work putting together the list of the world's 50 best beaches and said it was always nice to have the Whitsundays' stunning natural assets recognised. She said being recognised as the world's second best beach is a reminder of just how beautiful and special Whitehaven Beach is. The holder of the Best Beach title is Grace Bay in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And for the complete list of the world's 50 best beaches, visit www.flightnetwork.com. Hope you enjoyed that little trip to Whitehaven Beach in Queensland. Next on the show, we have Christy Duarte, the trans migrant, and this segment courtesy of ATW.TV, that's Around the World TV in Santa Barbara in California. And your presenters there, Arthur von Wiesenberger and Martha Bull.
And welcome back to Around the World. I'm Arthur von Wiesenberger with the lovely Martha Bull in studio.
Hello.
As we go globe-trotting around the world. You know, when you travel, what's the hardest thing to deal with?
Probably if you don't speak the language.
Oh, I thought you were going to say your credit cards. Well, for a lot of people, it's actually being able to speak. Because, like when I was in China, like in Macau, nobody spoke English there. And so as a result, I had to use sign language. And sometimes you do things with your fingers,
and
you
you
get
were
in a lot of trouble.
insulting.
You can get in a lot of trouble. But our next guest is someone who's very specialized in the world of travel. She travels all over the world.
And she's lived all over the world.
And she has indeed. Christy Duarte is also the author of a wonderful book called The Trans Migrant.
And well, Christy, join us and explain to us a little bit about this lovely book.
So the book is, hi, I'm Christy.
Hi.
So the book is about Jesus, but it's not really religious. Mm-hmm. But it's about the story when he travels through Asia and studies Hinduism and Buddhism. And of course, during his travels in those days, when they didn't have a universal language, he needed to speak to them and to the people he met. So I kind of used my own experiences from travels to describe how he communicated.
Okay. And I noticed that you not only have traveled to, I think, 70 countries, but you've also lived in various countries. What's the secret to success to being able to communicate?
Well, it's easier if you know the language, of course. Yeah. But in the beginning, when you move somewhere or you travel somewhere, then you really need to be open. You really need to kind of connect to the people that you meet in a way that's not with words. So the way I describe it is that you kind of like connect into their soul, and you stop listening to the words. Because as long as you listen to the words, then you're going to try, like brain is going to try to decipher the words and put them into words that are similar to whatever you're used to hearing. But when you stop listening to the word and just kind of sense what they want to say, it's amazing how much you can communicate with somebody and get your thoughts across.
I needed you to be with me in China, because I'll tell you, I sit down at these meetings in China, and we're speaking definitely two different languages, and they're looking at me like I'm cuckoo, which I might be a bit. But you know, it's almost like even if you have a translator there, they don't always get what you're saying, and they don't get the nuances, which I think is probably one of the most important things in language, is understanding what people really mean when they say something.
Yeah, I have to say that China was the most difficult country I've ever been to communicate. And for some reason they're a little bit less willing. But I think that in any case, like if you're in a business meeting and you have a translator, you really have to take a step back and try to not really like only look at their body language, but also try to kind of look into their brain, which sounds strange, but you kind of have to. Right. You have to like telecommunicate, like communicate through telepathy more than with words.
Now, do you do any pre-planning when you go into a country? There are certain things that you should never do in certain countries, like if you give a thumbs up, that's an insult. And as we were just talking to somebody else here, that if you're in some other countries, you can't, Aborigines, you can't look them in the eye. So do you do some pre-planning before you go someplace to make sure that you at least have a little step up on it?
Yeah, I try to remember this and read a little bit about it, but I think that, like in most cases, I just, after a couple of days, just sense it. And there's things like, you know, you sit on a train in India, and once my husband, he was massaging my feet, and then later I realized that it's very rude to do that, like touch somebody's feet. So the people we were with must have been very offended. But then again, they see us as foreigners, and they kind of give us a little bit more, they understand that we don't know their rules, but sure. You can't go anywhere and expect not to offend anyone. You will at one point or another. And the best thing to do is just to be open-minded, smile, and be friendly, because then they will understand that you didn't mean it.
Chrissy, in all the places you've traveled, now you just mentioned earlier that China was probably the most difficult place to communicate with as far as the language or the people themselves. Where was the easiest place that you've been to where you don't speak the language but you felt it was easy to communicate with the people?
That must have been Tibet. And maybe it was just because we came from China and we had the experience that we were not understood by anyone. But as soon as we crossed the border into Tibet, which is not really a border, of course, because it's occupied territory, but there suddenly we could understand everyone, and people wanted to talk to us, and they told us, you know, showed us the picture of the Dalai Lama in their, you know, pocket or on their cell phone or something like that. But I mean, anywhere I think we've been, or I have been, then you can communicate. And I know I'm not really answering your question, but
and well, here's another question for you. You mentioned iPhone. Do you ever use any of those apps where you can stick in a word in English or whatever, you know, and then translate it to the language that you're in the country?
I haven't, and I've thought about it, but I think a lot of the time, like, you want to be in the moment. You don't want to, like, look down on your phone.
Yeah,
But when we were in China, there were certain things like I don't eat meat, so I have to communicate that, I don't eat meat and don't serve me meat. So then I had the photo assigned for only vegetables on my phone. So I would
That's a good one. Well, Chrissy, it looks like a fascinating book, and sounds like you're an interesting globetrotter. So we appreciate you sharing some of those insights with us. And of course, if people want to pick up your book, The Transmigrant, you can get that at Amazon.com as well as other good bookstores around the country. And wish you a very good travel wherever the world may take you.
You heard from Christy Duarte, The Transmigrant. That segment courtesy of Around the World TV in Santa Barbara. Thank you to Arthur von Wiesenberger and Martha Bull. Next on the show, we take a segment from Australia's own Travel Writers Radio, which comes from Melbourne, and co-host Veronica Matheson chats with campervanner Lee Atkinson.
Veronica Matheson spoke to Lee about her travels around Australia with her partner Bill.
Lee, first of all, why did you go in a camper trailer? Wouldn't a caravan have been more comfortable on a trip that took the best part of a year?
Well, the thing about a camper trailer is they are actually just as comfortable as a caravan, but their advantage is that they can go to a lot of places that caravans and motorhomes can't. Especially the off-road ones, they can get out on the outback tracks, they can get into national parks. They're not as dependent on power, so you don't need to stay in a caravan park. You can set yourself up with solar. We could carry about 5 to 7 days worth of water on board, so we could set up for quite some time in wild places and not have to go into towns until we really needed to.
Sounds idyllic. So what are the places? I mean, there must have been some places you couldn't get to.
With an off-road camper trailer, you can pretty much get everywhere except for really sandy areas. And by those I'm talking about, crossing the Simpson Deserts, those sorts of things, because when it's sand dunes and there's no real firm track, you can't really tow anything. But other than that, other than a few dunes, you can pretty much go wherever you want.
And did you follow the coastline or did you head inland or did you zigzag across the country?
We did a bit of both. So because it was summer, the best thing was, because I'm based in northern New South Wales, was to head south, because during summer it's just too hot and wet up north. So we headed south. We traced along the coast. When we got about halfway up the WA coast, we decided to go inland. I love the desert country, so we followed a few of the outback desert tracks through to the Red Centre and then turned around and came back and then ended up northeast Arnhem Land, the tip of Cape York, and back home.
You must be getting to know some of these roads pretty well now because you've done it by car as well, haven't you?
I'm a road trip junkie.
But are there ever times on this particular trip when you felt like giving up and heading home?
Never giving up and heading home, but the trick to doing a long road trip like that, or any road trip holiday, I think, is to take your time and not try to move on every day, particularly when you're in a camper trailer, because while a camper trailer has lots of advantages, it does take a little bit longer to set up and pull down than a caravan or a motorhome. So the idea is to stay put for a few days, unhitch, explore the area, and then move on. So whenever we got tired and grumpy, we'd find a nice spot, usually overlooking a beach, no neighbours, somewhere where we could go into town and grab some nice food and wine, and we'd stay put for a week or so, and that would just recharge us completely.
Yes, I really liked in the book the way you have actually base camp so that you can use that particular spot and explore from there. It makes a lot of sense.
One of the reasons camper trailers are becoming so popular, it's not just because they can go anywhere, they're also a lot cheaper than caravans, so they're very popular with families, and most families prefer to just set up somewhere nice and stay put. No one wants to be setting up camp when you've got a couple of kids running around.
That's certainly true. So did you make some friends along the way?
We did make some nice friends, but we were a little bit antisocial too, I have to admit. We were really trying to find those out-of-the-way places, those remote places where you could set up camp and have no one else around. So we were a little bit antisocial that way. That's the beauty of a camper trailer, because it really does allow you to get into those out-of-the-way places.
Did you ever sort of run out of diesel? I presume you used it in the four-wheel drive.
We did use diesel. We never ran out, but we did have to carry a few jerry cans of extra fuel, particularly on the outback tracks in the western deserts. And there's no service stations out that way. You have to buy your fuel from outback stations, and it's often quite expensive.
Were there any big dramas along the way?
No, we didn't have any dramas. We got bogged a lot, but that's part of the fun. We were going into remote areas where that's to be expected, so we made sure we had a long-handled shovel to dig ourselves out of trouble when we got into it, and we tried not to get too upset when that happened, because that is part of the adventure if you want to go remote. No dramas, and we didn't have a winch or anything like that. We really didn't need it, but we were lucky, and we kept track of our tyre pressure too. A lot of people make the mistake of keeping their tyres too high. If you keep them a bit low when you're in sandy or rocky conditions, that'll often stop you getting stuck in the first place.
Did you get sort of to the stage where you knew some shortcuts as far as setting up camp and all of that?
It didn't take us very long at all. We were only on the road for a couple of weeks, and we were in a routine we could set up within 15 minutes, and we didn't even have to speak. We knew exactly who did what in what order.
And what about food? I mean, did you, tinned, packaged and dehydrated foods?
No, we ate fresh almost every night. I mean, another beauty of a camper trailer is you've got a fridge on board, so you don't have to rely on dried and dehydrated rations. And these days it's a lot easier to get fresh food in remote communities than it was a decade or two ago. So we always set off with the aim, especially when we're on the coast, to have fresh fish at night, but we're both hopeless fisher folk, so we tended to eat a bit more meat than we wanted to, but fresh food was the way to go. And so we came back feeling really healthy because we were doing lots of walking and eating really well.
That sounds fantastic. Can you recall a meal that you think, that was the best meal I've had in the whole year?
Yes, I can. It was in Cape York, in Weipa, where the fishing's fairly legendary. As I said, I'm a hopeless fisher person, but we did manage to catch a few sardines, of all things, and we fried them up with some oil and garlic over an open fire and ate them with our fingers, and it was just divine.
So I hope they were big sardines, were they?
But we ate the bones and all.
Why not? Imagine that you spent a lot of your nights on the road actually writing about the day's experiences. Was that the way you went?
Yeah, it's the country is so varied. A lot of people think because Australia is so big it's all the same, but it does change quite quickly, and so it was nice to keep notes. I also take a lot of photographs.
The images in the book are terrific, and also, as you say, the way it's laid out, it makes you, and the maps too, you want to get up and go.
Well, we're hoping that people can use these maps to follow and find these places. I've also included GPS coordinates for some of the really out-of-the-way places because you won't find them in normal tourism brochures. So you can use those coordinates in your GPS and off you go.
When you look back on the journey, are there some things that you would have done differently?
I wouldn't have taken as many clothes as I did. We took far too much stuff. And even though we were on the road for the best part of a year, I'd still take more time. I think the trick is not to try to... I mean, we wanted to do a lap of the country, but there's so much to see. You could spend almost a year just in Cape York. It doesn't matter how many times I've been back to the Kimberley, there's always more to see. And so there's always more than you think. And so I'd take my time and really explore.
Now, were there some things you wished you'd been told before you left that you had to learn on the road?
When I researched our trip, I found there was, because we've had a camper trailer now for about a decade, and we'd head off whenever we could. Whenever we had a spare couple of weeks, we'd go bush. When I started researching it for our big lap, I realised that there was a lot of information out there for four-wheel drivers, a lot of information out there for caravanners, but nothing for camper trailers. And the reason that is important is, although camper trailers are different to caravans in that they can go other places, they also have different needs when they're set up in camp. They're a lot smaller on the road, but when you set them up, they're actually a lot bigger than a caravan, 2-3 times the living space, which means they don't often fit in your typical caravan park camping bay or even a lot of campsites in national parks if they've got bollards. And I didn't really realise that you face those problems until I started to try to find information, and that was one of the reasons why I decided to do this book, because there's nothing else out there that's geared up specifically for camper trailer people, and yet it's such a fast-growing area. In the last 2.5 years, registrations of camper trailers have gone up almost 30%.
It's probably easier actually than driving a caravan, wouldn't it be?
Oh, much easier, because when they're packed up, they're so small. You don't need such a heavy-duty four-wheel drive. You use less fuel, less wear and tear on your vehicle, a lot easier to manoeuvre. And when you get home, a lot easier to store because you can fit them in a normal carport. You don't have to find a big shed like you do for a big caravan.
And I'm also sure that the trailer, you can put it somewhere for the night and sneak off to a reasonable hotel if you were a little bit tired of camping.
And we did do that. We had a bit of a rule that if we got somewhere and it was pouring with rain or blowing a gale, life's too short, we went to a pub and found a room.
That was Lee Atkinson, whose latest book, Explore Australia by Camper Trailer, includes maps, photos and reviews of camping sites in the bush, in national parks, on cattle stations and in caravan parks across Australia. And it details what to do and what to see along the way.
Veronica Matheson chatting with Lee Atkinson on that segment, courtesy of Travel Writers Radio. Next on the show, we have time for one more spot. Jeff Harrison returns and he gives us the lowdown on the Elves Hideaway, all the way up there in Finland.
Kuivat heinät, kauralyhteet, hirret, savunhajuiset. Riihen hämärässä. Vilja kuivuu, alkaa puinti, riihitonttu ahkeroi. Riihen lämpimässä.
It's a magical place. We are located in Arctic Lapland, about 2 hours drive from Rovaniemi, and we have our own airport, Kittila, so it's very easy to come to Levi. It is above the Arctic Circle, as I said, and we have it's a world famous for downhill skiing and cross-country skiing. Elves Holiday Resort is 4 hotels, it is 15 restaurants, an experience village, and all the possible activities and fun that you can imagine to have in the Arctic.
Aitassa ja pihalla, tontut vilisee, lakin kulkuset kilisee, kilisee. Kohta joulu täällä on, tontut vilisee, joulun kulkuset kilisee.
We say that the Northern Lights, they come up in August, the last week of August, and this is actually a very good time to come and see them already because it's dark and the snow is not on the ground. But you know, during the Christmas time, during the winter time in January, February, it is amazing experience, and we know that it's on many people's bucket list.
Kilisee, kohta joulu täällä on, tontut vilisee, joulun kulkuset kilisee, aitassa ja pihalla, tontut vilisee, Lapin kulkuset kilisee, kohta joulu täällä on, tontut vilisee, joulun kulkuset kilisee.
Yeah, and Levi is such an international hub anyway, so this is a great place to be, and it's very easy to get around. It's a small, compact village. We have great snowmobile routes. We have good infrastructure, so it's it's a must place to experience in the Arctic. You can go to elveshideaway.com, or we have a crazyreindeer.com address as well. Highly recommend to visit us and see our accommodation. And if you want to get information about the general area, then it's levi.com. Please visit.
Thank you, Jeff. And Jeff will be back next month, as will many of our other presenters on Travel Radio Australia. I'd like to thank them all. Jeff Harrison, of course, with his guests. We had Arthur von Wiesenberger, Martha Bull from Around the World TV and Santa Barbara. Also Veronica Matheson from Travel Writers Radio. And until we meet again with the next edition of Travel Radio Australia, I'm Ren Zwiers, wishing you all happy trails.